All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is Wednesday, July 26th of 2023 here. We have a 5-game MLB early slate already underway here. Good luck to all of you if you guys are playing that slate. We have a 5-game main slate later this evening, and then we also have the 3M Open teeing off tomorrow morning. So it should be a fun day of DFS. Get that all-day sweat here. Get the double the split 5-game slates here. So it should be a fun day overall. But for those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. It's a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS-related questions. Questions can come in one of 3 ways. Either via support, you can reach us at support@sabersim.com. You can reach us by posting questions in the YouTube chat. Post your questions there. We get to all the questions before the end of the show. And you can also post questions in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord, want to get access to that, there is a link in the description below to join. Highly recommend it. Get access to all of our similar channels. See when lineups are released. See when sims run for that updated news. See when players are scratched as well. Get access to all of our individual sport channels where members of the community and members of the SaberSim team are helping each other, giving and taking feedback each and every day around DFS strategy and concepts. If you want to grow as a member, as a DFS player here, joining the Discord and being a member is a great place to be. But with that being said, I'm going to get the app pulled up here. Snowman said, good morning. What is up, Snowman? Looks like we have 2 questions here. One from Toasted Taters and one from Craig. So if you guys have any questions, now is a great time to get those in. But I'm going to start with these 2, and then we will see where we go from there. All right. Toasted Tater said, is there a way to have all the lineup quality, salary, projected score, ownership percent, stack, saver score, etc., downloaded with the lineups when you download them? So at the moment on the main app, there is not a way to do this. I don't know if this is going to be a new feature on the new version of SaberSim. So for those of you guys who aren't aware, we are testing a beta version of the SaberSim app here. A lot of discussion around it, some of the features that are coming. I think it's really cool. I've been starting to use it a little more myself, trying to get familiar with it before the release here. So I don't know if that's going to be a new feature coming or not. If it is not, I will take this back to the team as a feature request. So make summary stats downloadable. Summary stats download. All right. So if it's not coming, I will find out if that's a new feature coming. If it's not, I'll make sure to put that on the list of ideas for as we continue to grow the app here. All right. Next question from Craig. Question says, Andrew, as a new player of DFS this year for MLB, is it generally a bad thing to have opposing team stacks in the same lineup? I realize that both teams can score runs, but is this something that I should avoid in general? What's a rule I can set to prevent this from happening? Thanks. Okay, so want to answer this first part first. Says, is it generally a bad thing to have opposing team stacks in the same lineup? So the answer to this is no, right? There's not a good reason, at least that I'm aware of, as to why you would want to avoid having 2 teams from the same game in a lineup, right? But don't take my word for it, right? What you can do here is you can basically ask SaberSim what SaberSim thinks. Like, hey, how do you feel about game stacks, right? And the way to do this is to run a build, default settings, no adjustments, no nothing, and then go into the post build and then go into the game stacks tab and then see what it looks like, right? So I ran this build. I didn't make any adjustments here. I'm going to go to the game stacks tab, and then I'm going to see mostly what I care about is how many lineups are being built with game stacks across the entire pool, and then how many of these game stack lineups are ending up in my set of lineups here. So on average, so it looks like there's not any game stack owned or built as a lineup more than 13% here. So the most game stack exposure we have in our pool is 12.3% to Atlanta and Boston. And then the game that is being used the most is Texas and Houston here. So it's being used at about 3 times the rate that it's showing up in the pool here. But this is like before I went and adjusted my uniques, before I did anything else, right? So if I were to go through kind of my normal process here, because before I get to game stacks, I do min uniques, I do stack types. We do this right to left approach. So let me just take a step back here, increase my min uniques to, I'll say half here, right? I'm going to do half of the players in my lineup, or I could max it out. But even just doing half here has lowered my max, my exposure to that Texas Houston to 20%. It actually boosted the Mets in New York to 25%. I bet if I were to go higher on my uniques, closer a little bit more to the Jordan approach here, we would end up with a lower overall exposure here. So 20% being the max to Oakland and San Francisco, which is like 2x that pool percentage here, right? So in general, I don't think you have to actively avoid game stacks, but you can, just, I would say, do like a sanity check or do some type of check in your process, right? So when you are going from mini uniques to stack types to game stacks, right? You don't have to skip over game stacks. Click that, make sure everything looks okay. Make sure that none of the exposure is, you're not getting ultra leverage on a particular game stack here. You could use this as part of your process here and then make sure that you take that step. Okay. And then second part was, basically if I want to avoid a game stack, what's a rule I can set to prevent this here? So it depends. One way you could do this is say, so we'll do a rule type group selection method automatic, and then I'll change use to if. So then what I'm going to say is if at least 3 players group by team. So if I use at least 3 players from a team, then use no more than 1 on the opposing team. And then this would be one way to write a rule that prevents game stacks, basically. You could try something where you do use no more than, X from a game here. So I can say use no more than 5 from a game. So allowing for 5 stacks of one team, but you can still end up with like a 3-2 or something like that. So that's why the if then works a little better. You get to control that secondary stack a little more here. One other thing with the game stacks here that I do want to point out is that, when we think of stacks, right, we think of stacks as a group of players that are usually 2 or more in general. I would say is like a pretty safe assumption, right? So like a stack of Boston, we usually be 2 players from Boston, right? With the game stacks specifically here, sometimes you can find game stacks where you are only using 1 player from each team. I'm almost positive that's like a thing here, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to find a good example of it, unfortunately. So Chicago, okay, so this Chicago White Sox is perfect. So in this lineup, I have 1 player from the Cubs, and then I have 1 player from Houston, 4 players from the Yankees, and then I have 1 player from the White Sox. So this technically counts as a game stack here. So tread lightly with these game stack exposures here, because it's basically counting 2 players from the same game. So it's thinking the stack is at least 2 players from the same game is the way that this is being read. It's not reading, okay, 2 players from Chicago and then, 1 player from White Sox or 2 players from White Sox. So be a little careful here. If you want to just prevent this with a rule, probably your better option. And the rule would look just how we wrote it. Okay. Next question in the Discord from JWH. JWH said, any chance we get a preview soon of the Holy Grail Sims Matt has been tweeting about? Haha. So Matt likes to tease all the new upcoming features on Twitter and wherever they may be. I actually did a preview of the beta on Friday's office hours. So if you guys ever want to, go and catch up on office hours, you guys miss a show, you can go to the YouTube channel, go to playlists, and then go down to the office hours playlist, catch up on the latest office hours live streams. And then on Friday's stream, which would have been probably this one that was 4 days ago here. So you can go to this. He is, and I think we jumped around a little bit here between some of the beta features. So let's see if I can find it. Okay, so this is the beta here. So like at like this 4-minute mark, we didn't have any questions on Friday, so I was like, hey, why don't we just do a little bit of a beta tutorial here? So I talked about beta here, showed you guys how to run a build, show you guys kind of some of the upcoming features, and then toward the end, we talked about contest simming on the beta. So let's see if I can in this section here. So a great thing in the description, we do timestamp different questions that come in. There's not going to be a timestamp of the beta demo because there were no questions. So that's why it's not there. But can you show the contest sims? That part is timestamped, and then just go through the intro. And then when you're going through the intro, you will see the tutorial about the beta. So check that out if you're looking for more info. We're going to have so much content and streams and information around that. Around the new version when it goes live here. So not trying to exhaust the beta here. There's going to be plenty of time for questions related to that. Just trying to help people with the normal version of the app get better and win contests in the meantime here. All right. Good questions so far. We are all caught up with questions in the Discord. Jumping over to the YouTube chat. Got one question here from Deshaun. Deshaun said, I have a question about ownership. If I get a hunch through research of a few team stacks or pitchers higher owned and bump them up, does that affect the sims? And does SaberSim automatically get you lower owned stacks or players? Okay, good question here. So this is one of like the best value adds that I suggest users can do here. So great to hear that you're doing this. You know, adjusting ownership from listening to other content, listening to what people have to say online, you know, reading articles like who's on the front page of, you know, the RotoWire article today. Is it Spencer Strider? You know, are they saying he's a good play? Like, is that going to lead to more ownership for Spencer Strider, right? So listening to some of the industry touting and hearing what people have to say and then adjusting ownership accordingly, I think is a good value add here, right? So, so say you do that, right? Adjusting ownership is only going to give the builder more accurate inputs, right? So ownership is this interesting thing where you actually want it to be as like specific as possible. So like Spencer Strider, we can play this game, you know, 100 times, right? And he's going to score differently across all of those 100 times. When with ownership, you know, once the contest starts, that ownership is locked in, and then that is the player's ownership. So you want ownership to be as accurate as possible because that's only going to help the builder to make better decisions, right? So when Spencer Strider is 30% owned, his adjusted ownership is 31%. But what if Spencer Strider is going to be 80% owned, right? Then his adjusted ownership goes up to 90%. It has this cascading effect on all of the other ownerships and adjusted ownerships of all the other pitchers on the slate, right? So having that, you know, that was obviously an extreme example, but the more accurate your ownership is, the more accurate our adjusted ownership is going to be, and then the more accurate the adjusted ownership of the entire pool here is going to, or the entire position is going to be more accurate. And then if you adjust the ownership, that does not automatically mean that you are going to end up on lower owned plays or different plays. That those are just going to be more accurate inputs for the builder to identify, right? So say you take Spencer Strider from 30%, SaberSim thinks he's a good play, you bump up his ownership to 35%. That doesn't mean that SaberSim is automatically going to say, you know, okay, Spencer Strider's 35% owned now, we got to get to less of him. SaberSim is going to analyze that new input and then determine, okay, you know, does Spencer Strider still perform well enough that we should roster him at this ownership? That's the question that is being asked each time you adjust that ownership. Like, hey, is this player worth this ownership? And then there is an equilibrium point, right? There is a point where, you know, okay, you know, beyond this number, you know, he is not as good of a play as below this number, right? So you don't know if you're approaching that equilibrium or not exactly here, but if you're looking to get on lower owned plays, I would mess around with your Saber score that you're using. So if you click on this eye icon, you could see the Saber score formula here, and then you can see what the weights for all the variables are. So on a small slate, 100 to 1K entrants, we have a negative 0.6 weight on average adjusted ownership. It's that metric specifically that is basically deciding, hey, are we playing, are we okay allowing higher owned lineups into our pool or into our set, or are we going to get away from those lineups and play different lineups from the pool in our set of 20, right? And then that's at 100 to 1K was negative 0.6. If I go to small slate 50K plus, the negative weight goes up to negative 0.9. So this would be a much more aggressively fading ownership custom metric here, right? So, or Saber score metric. So this Saber score metric is going to fade lineups with high ownership much more than the one with less entries here. So if you're, building lineups and your lineups, are too chalky for your taste here, adjust the Saber scores and, possibly increase the entrance to get on some more low owned plays is the way to do that. And then, if you're on the pro plan, what you could do is you could even build a custom metric and rebuild the Saber score formula here, and then increase the negative weight to whatever you like, right? So trial and error, right? See what different weights have on your exposures. Try to find a happy point for you and your risk tolerance. All right. Great question there. That was a solid one. And we are all caught up with questions in the Office Hours channel in the YouTube chat. So if anybody has any last questions that they want to get in before the end of today's show, now's a great time to do that. Just a note for you guys, we have tomorrow's stream, and then we will not have a show on Friday. I will be out on Friday, so no show from back until Monday here. So get your questions in today, get your questions in tomorrow, or you guys will have to wait until Monday. But in the meantime, while we wait for any last questions to roll in here, just want to remind you guys, if you guys are not playing over on Owner's Box, would highly recommend taking advantage of our promotion with them. We partnered with Owner's Box at the beginning of the MLB season here. First major optimizer to support Owner's Box contests. Owner's Box is an up-and-coming DFS site here, and a lot of their contests are overlaying at the moment. You can find contests where they are paying you to play. Your $5 entry becomes $6 by the time the contest locks. No rate contests, reduced rate contests. The competition is generally going to be softer than what you're going to find on DK, FanDuel, or Yahoo here. And then when you use promo code SABER or SaberSim when you sign up, one, you can get up to a $500 deposit bonus. Two, we will track your entry fees for you. And each time you hit one of our entry fee tiers, we will reach out to you, let you know you have earned a free month of SaberSim. You can wait for the next price tier, or you can cash in on that free month right away. Once you cash in, we will automatically reset your tracking to 0. There is no limit on the amount of credit that you can earn while this promotion lasts. So take advantage of it while it is here. All right. And jumping back to the SaberSim app, a couple questions rolling in. Thank you guys. Happy to hang around and answer questions as long as they are coming in. JWH asking for access to beta. JWH, all you got to do to get beta access is upgrade to a SaberSim Pro plan, my man. All right. Snowman said football is back. Training camp is back. You're going to get all of the 10-second clips where people are going to overreact, right? I saw one today with Calvin Ridley. So there was a clip of Zay Jones running a route, and then there was a clip of Calvin Ridley running a route right behind him, and Calvin Ridley looked faster than Zay Jones, and everybody is already saying how Calvin Ridley is back. So really funny to watch and to hear the narratives and to watch people overreact. So be careful out there if you guys are playing in best ball or things like that. Try not to overreact. 2 very short clips is one piece of advice here. All right, Deshaun said, when looking at player pool exposures or stack exposures, are the pool exposures basically saying these players or stacks are optimal or best optimal? Also, does the Sims take into account park factors and parks that give players a home run boost? Okay, I'm going to answer the second part first. So, yes, so we take into account environmental factors, park factors. We understand park dimensions. We understand wind speed, wind direction, temperature, etc. So all of those environmental type factors, all of those park factors, we do take those into account, and we can work those into our sims. Those are static variables or inputs to our MLB model. And then first part was when looking at stack and pool exposures, is it basically saying these plays or stacks are optimal or best optimal. Okay, so really good question here. So the way that I like to analyze this information is that not to say that they're optimal or that like a 5-2 at 31% is our highest pool exposure. So the pool exposures are the rate that they're showing up across the sims at the rate that they're being built at, right? So each time we're building your lineup, it is summarizing, how many times this lineup is being built, right? So this gives you a good indicator of, to me, the way I try and interpret this is what are, good type of stacks for this slate. What stacks do I might want to try and avoid? Like, for instance, there's no 3 stack as your primary stack over 2%. So to me, I'm like, well, I don't really want to play that high of a rate of 3 stacks here, right? So having one lineup with a 3 stack, okay, I'm fine with that, right? All in all, there's probably about 6% of lineups with a 3 stack. So having one lineup with a 3 stack, totally okay with that, right? But if I were to be having, 20% of 3 stacks, I might, whoa, pump the brakes. Let's rethink that a little bit here, right? But the builder is really good at doing this naturally, right? In our 20 lineups here, I have 30% 5-2s and I have about 31% 5-2s showing up in my pool. So I think that you could look at this closer to like a good rate to play these lineups at. If they're showing up at this rate, playing them close to this rate, I think is fine. I think that, you could just use this pool exposure as a baseline safety check, right? So the way that I really like to use this is for stack pool exposures. So when I am looking at my stack pool exposures, I like to see, okay, who's coming up most often? What are my exposures to these guys? And then who is coming up most often in my top 20? And then what is my stack pool exposures to these lineups, right? So kind of this cross check between stack pool exposure and how often it's coming up in the 20 lineups that I'm playing, right? So if I were to have, Texas here is my lowest stack pool exposure. If Texas was my highest exposure on the slate by a 3x margin from my stack pool exposure, that might be a little bit too much risk for me, right? I might want to walk that back. So I think that, having your exposures, using that as a reference, something to use as your quote unquote baseline, right, is a good way to ground yourself when understanding how much risk you are assuming by playing this stack at this rate. So kind of the way I like to think about it. All right. That was our last question. I know I've made last call a couple times here, so I think we're going to call it there today, everybody. Like I said, we'll be right back here tomorrow. Tomorrow will be our last show of the week, 2 p.m. Eastern. As always, if you guys are building lineups throughout the day, question pops in your head, drop it in the Office Hours channel, drop it in the upcoming stream chat on YouTube. If you guys drop your questions there, that will get us a steady queue of questions to get the show started with tomorrow. But until then, take care. Good luck in your contests. One last question here from Samuel. What role does adjusted ownership play in risk management? Great question here. So I think that adjusted ownership is playing a huge factor in risk management, right? So, if you are just looking at players' fantasy point projections, you are not taking into account how often they achieve this outcome, right? So if I go to batters, Ronald Acuna, highest fantasy point projection. You're saying, okay, I want to pack as many fantasy points into my lineups as possible, but you're not taking into account the fact that Ronald Acuna scores 0 points 16% of the time. He scores about 5 points 16% of the time. Those numbers are not his average projection of 11.3, right? 11.3 is going to be closer to 12% of the time. So really, adjusted ownership is looking at the player's fantasy point projection, looking at their ownership and looking at their range of outcomes, and then figuring out, okay, based on this player's range of outcomes, what should we put their adjusted ownership at? What should we treat their ownership as? And then the builder can use this in the Saber score formula to figure out how much exposure we should have to this play. So adjusted ownership is balancing range of outcomes and ownership and fantasy point expectation to figure out, is this play very likely to achieve their fantasy point outcome, or is this play, a lot riskier and we should manage our exposure to this player? So I think adjusted ownership has a great part in doing risk management without you even having to think about it, right? Or at least taking that first step towards risk management. Samuel said, will there be adjusted ownership on stacks? So no, there won't be. And the reason for that is because adjusted ownership is handled on the positional level here, right? So if I go to my pitchers and I adjust Spencer Strider, so Lance Lynn has an adjusted ownership of 29% right now. If I increase Spencer Strider to 80% ownership, that's going to affect everybody's adjusted ownership. Lance Lynn goes to 28. Carlos Rodon went to 31. Carlos Rodon was at 32. So it has a cascading effect on the entire position here. So that is why it's not going to have an effect on a stack level. But in theory, you know, all of these positions combined, we're using the average adjusted ownership of the lineup in your Saber score formula. So basically what we are doing here is we are looking at all the players' adjusted ownerships, averaging them out, and then using that number as an input to your Saber score. So the entire, you know, all of the stacks, all of the individual players all get averaged out here. So in theory, you know, there's not an adjusted ownership per stack, because stacks can be comprised of different batters, different number of batters. So there's not a great way to do that, but we are taking all that information into account. But really good question there. All right, we're going to get out of here. I will see you guys all tomorrow. Take care. Peace.